So I am Dr. Brenda Lopez Ortiz. I am the Senior Instructional Technology Specialist at the Department of Educational Technology Services, one of the departments that is proudly hosting this conference today. With me, my highly esteemed colleagues, Garamis Gampusano, who is the Educational Technology Specialist for the Center for Advancement of Teaching, and Maikel, who is the Associate Director of Instructional Technology, Instructional Learning Technology for FIU Online. Now, Maikel here, it's actually a cyborg who's still celebrating Halloween, so he's disguised as a human.
These are facts.
And his mission today is going to be to defend all things AI. Garamis, on the other hand, he's the Grinch of AI. He's going to be finding all the flaws that can happen when we try to implement AI in higher education. So we thought that we would start with some definitions so that we are all on the same page. And the first one is, logically, artificial intelligence. When you think about artificial intelligence, you're going to think about this field that is attempting to... Should we move to the sides a little bit?
You can see on the sides.
Okay, perfect. So it is that field that deals with trying to program computers so that they engage in human-like intelligent activities so that they can aid us in the tasks that we need to complete. And then a very central concept to artificial intelligence is the algorithm. And so an algorithm, when you think about it, you're going to think about a step-by-step procedure. It's systematic, it's precise, and the purpose is to try to solve a problem or complete a task. And so, as you know, AI is in our lives every day. And for example, in the world of Google Maps and directions, you'll hear Google Maps telling you, you're on the fastest routes, display some traffic. And your friend Amazon, in the world of shopping, will tell you customers who viewed items in your browsing history also viewed blah, 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 and they show you a few products and they have their fingers crossed hoping that they will, that you will buy them.
They get me every time.
Me too. In the world of entertainment, this time with movies, we have Netflix, and Netflix tells us because you watched, and they provide a list of titles that are similar to the one you just watched in the hopes that you will stay there, not get up, not do your chores, not prepare for the next day, nothing. They just want you to sit there.
Too many AIs. It's just too many AIs everywhere.
And then those of you who have iPhones, you have the assistant named Siri. So, you tell them, hey Siri, and Siri basically helps you. On those with newer iPhones, hey Siri is really becoming more human-like, and she'll go, Have you heard that? Anybody has had that? My husband has one of those phones. I'm so jealous, so jealous. Mine is still not human-like. And lastly, in the world of music, we have Spotify providing a playlist for you to listen to songs that they think that you will like based on your interactions with the platform.
I didn't like Bad Bunny as much until Spotify started choosing my music, and Spotify knows best. I don't know if you all know that. It's just knows best.
Okay.
Really, Garamis, already?
It does know best.
It does?
I guess I should wait.
Yes. So obviously then AI has its also its potential in higher education, and it has many different areas in which it can have an impact. Today we're only going to focus on these three, and what we will do is we will discuss some of the ideas that are relevant in each of these areas when it comes to AI and its impact. So Maikel, how about you take over?
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about this area of AI's deployment in higher ed. And I think, unfortunately, the idea of AI for many of us seems almost distant or out of touch, right? It's something that's appropriate in marketing or in sci-fi movies, maybe helping out NASA with the James Webb Telescope. But AI is already being deployed here in higher ed. And one of the areas that we see the greatest interest for it and some of the biggest dollars being spent is in the admissions process. Now, some of you are like, wait, is AI out here choosing exactly who can go to college and who can't go to college? No, I'm not going to make it that easy for Garamis.
Oh.
But what AI is being used to do is create better predictive models to say, hey, these students right here They are particular students who succeed at your school or who might require a little bit more follow-up from your enrollment personnel. They create really great student profiles. They help with marketing. And what I want you to imagine is all of us want our alumni to be more connected. Well, now if we have AI come into our system and says this person graduated with a degree in construction management, and what we've noticed is there's been a disruption in the field, and you all offer a certificate. Now the program can attach that student profile to the updates in your departments and reach out to the student and says, hey, why don't you come back to FIU and we can help you become more disrupt-proof for the industry that you're in. And something that I know is very near and dear to our hearts here at FIU, AI is a tool that allows us to be more efficient. And in the admissions process, we know how important that is, because during summer is where we unfortunately experience a lot of students disengaging with their enrollment process. A lot of students who would have succeeded here and brought some great value to FIU. And so we've seen AI being deployed as a way to follow up with students, regularly checking in, making sure they're getting the information they need, and doing so timely, freeing up space and time for our enrollment specialist and that team to take care of more complex requests.
But Professor Wright, what's up with the Harry Potter hat?
I'm glad you caught that. So I thought the best way to represent these predictive student models was with the sorting hat. For those of you who may be familiar with a small book out there, Harry Potter, there was a sorting hat that saw into the future and put students into the best place that they were supposed to go. I'm actually kind of curious. Brenda, do you happen to know the house that you belong to?
I am on the best place. Ravenclaw.
Ravenclaw, yes. Team Ravenclaw. And Garamis?
I'm Gryffindor.
Oh my gosh. Look, never mind. I'm not going to make this about Harry Potter. Team Ravenclaw all the way, though. But yeah, that's why I chose sorting hat for admissions.
I see.
Yeah.
So before you move on, Maikel, this all sounds great and all, but I'm still a little concerned about these predictive, sort of profiles and analytics. It almost seems to me like, the AI is still sort of like choosing, who gets into our institutions. Is that really wise?
Garamis. Many people who have their apprehensions with AI bring up that consideration. Mm-hmm. I think some of the concerns are: is AI going to make situations less equitable, or is AI choosing this going to make this less personal? Mm-hmm. And almost every time that I hear that kind of reaction, I consider and I say, well, how good are we doing right now without that tool? Right? What I want to keep on communicating, AI is a tool to help extend, make us more efficient, and help us do those items that maybe hiring additional staff might be almost or nearly impossible to do. So while the concern for an AI being a part of the process, I think we still see, or we may be picking out a problem with a tool that necessarily we're seeing without the tool. So I'd almost believe it's almost like I assign Black Mirror in some of my courses for my students to watch. Is it necessarily the tool that's gone dark here, or just the human factor that we haven't yet figured out?
Okay.
Area number 2.
I see 2 other areas there.
Yes.
I see marketing, and then I see we're bringing little robots to our universities. No.
Absolutely. Automations.
Oh, okay.
I want more robots. Maybe some to bring Panera all the way over to the west side of campus.
Yes.
That would be, just letting IT know that's a request out there. I think the second area, though, is one that I am outrageously excited about. We've got some really great case studies for, and that's in the area of advising. Now, if anyone here has ever gone to college, you know that college is riddled with success and horror stories when it comes to advising. And the truth of the matter is, we place a heavy burden on our advisors to be able to predict and see and know so many things, so robust about our learners, about the programs that they're enrolled in. AI is already being deployed at a large university in Australia using IBM Watson to not only answer some of those low-order questions for our students to get them the answers they need, but to also give our advisors more information, helping our students succeed in the areas that AI has used historical data to help predict that success for. We're also using AI right now for our fully online students with a predictive analytics program to find those students who may have early signs of not doing so well in the course, right? We've looked at 3 years of data in some of our high enrollment courses and said, if a student may not do successful on this particular assignment, is spending this much time in the course, this student is in a red zone. And maybe what we can do now, instead of, you've heard of preventative medicine, but now we can do some preventative advising, some preventative interventions for our faculty, for our success coaches, for advisors. And so AI in advising, I'm so excited, so pumped for. It will make, and it will continue to make the advising experiences that you have high contact, high touch points, and take care of some of those other issues, alleviating that for our advisors. And then, of course, AI, as we see with Spotify, as we see in Netflix, when you were showing that Netflix example earlier, I remember reading an article where the individuals talking about Netflix in their relationship says, Netflix sometimes knows me better than my partner does. Right? Like, what should we watch today? Everyone's like, oh, let's watch a horror movie. Like, it's not me at all. And that's what I think AI will help us do with the advising process. Use their profile, use the information to make a personalized journey for our learners.
Maikel.
You can't find flaws in that.
Oh,
I think I did it.
Maikel.
I think I got him.
But how do we know that these recommendations are actually accurate? That's the question. Like, isn't there a possibility that there might be some inaccuracies in how the algorithm is coming up to these conclusions, right? And making these recommendations, right, to our advising teams?
Sure. Okay, all right. I do want to say that I'm not purporting in that AI. All right, he's pretty good on these. What I'm saying is artificial intelligence deployed as a tool expands and extends the capability of what our advisors could do alone. In fact, the idea that AI can come along and kind of leave those higher order, high touch human advising experiences, I think really is what's going to help the entire process be more accurate. And it is a tool, a huge tool, that can now get us more information faster and far more efficient to intercede on the student's behalf.
I think we have
all right?
a third area here when it comes to assessment. So, Maikel, go ahead. I'm going to try to stop Garamis from,
Thank you.
Hey, Ravenclaw.
I appreciate that. Two areas too late, but that's fine.
Too many Ravenclaws on the stage.
I'm gonna go really fast on this one because we all see artificial intelligence potential in assessment. In fact, here's where we've seen our highest number of case studies, applications. I mean, if any of you have heard of a tool called HonorLock, all right, I'm seeing some mixed feelings on that, and I understand that. I serve on the university's academic integrity committee, on our student conduct committee, and of course, in our partnerships with ETS as well. We're constantly working and looking at the best ways to provide assessment support to our faculty. And something you might not know that HonorLock does that none of us could replicate in the time that it does is HonorLock will take your assessments, place maybe the beginning of a question on a bogus site, and be able to identify the time and the location of the individual who might have searched that answer. That happens instantly. What HonorLock is doing there, it's leveraging the power of AI to help increase the credibility and integrity of you certifying that when a student has passed your course with a particular grade, they've earned that. Artificial intelligence in being used in assessments, primary goal is to alleviate time off for our faculty so that they can go in and spend a little bit more time on comments, on maybe some of that preventative teaching. We're seeing tools that are helping teachers or faculty grade submissions, auto-grading. Look, Auto grading is one of the greatest reasons why I'm still teaching. I know many of us are like, oh, man, when it comes out with papers, we're about it. Our enrollment is staying where it's at right now, and my courses haven't gotten down in enrollment. But the amount of assignments I'm submitting has stayed the same. And so we see the value of AI for auto grading, even for feedback, giving little hints to students like, hey, you might have missed this, or hey, this is due at this particular time. AI in assessments, in grading is ridiculously powerful, one that I think we're all seeing every day. You got nothing on this one?
I do have something on this one.
And you're going to have a lot of it, right, later?
Yes.
Remember the stories that we read about the horror log? I mean, the honor log?
Okay, wait, hold on. Ravenclaw, what happened?
Well, look,
Well, I mean, the truth
look,
is-
just on academic integrity alone, right?
Okay.
This all sounds a little too much like Big Brother. Okay. What happened to, exploration of knowledge, the pursuit of knowledge, academic freedom? I mean, we're basically asking these AIs to be the police, to our students. Is that really what we want?
There's an interesting opposition to the conversations of artificial intelligence being used in various areas. And what people regularly tell me is, Maikel, but what about the human touch? Maikel, what about the human touch? I have a funny kind of allegory to this. I went to Vegas for a conference this weekend, and I showed my students how I went to an establishment where they serve drinks with what some would consider alcohol. And at this place, robots prepared your drinks for you. And I was telling my students, like, disruption. You think these jobs are safe, but even robots are coming for bartenders' jobs. And they're like, no, professor, the human component. And then I paused and I said, think about the last time you were at a busy club or a bar or whatever. What was the human component there? You got skipped, they randomly, whatever, got you and just passed it to you. And so I think this goes along that human component touch. When we have a ton of students, when we have the certain demands we have, and we haven't been able to give that human touch, AI can actually come in and give us the space, the time, take some of that heavy load so that we can be more human. So I'm going to say something contentious. AI actually will allow us and help us be more human.
Oh, wow.
All right, we'll see. Well, I mean, all of this really sounds promising. I'm not, even though I'm teasing one side or the other. I do think there's a lot of promise. However, this is where bias rears its ugly face.
Oh boy.
And so when we think of bias, we are basically thinking about a personal judgment that is probably not based on reason. It might be based on experience, but it is not empirical experience. So maybe I had one or two contacts with a group of people. I didn't like how they behaved, and so now everybody else from that same group, it's going to be not anybody that I would like to hang out with. So this is one of the things that we have to watch out for. And when it comes to algorithm bias, I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to read these definitions here. So let's take a few moments. What we will do is we will adopt this definition, which sort of brings important points from those two definitions. And when we think about algorithm bias, we're going to think about predictions that are made by these AI systems that are not equitably considering all groups in order to provide the resources or whatever it is that these groups need. And so because this is such an important point, we want to, and the reason why that it happens is that there has been a tendency to compute first and ask questions later, right? This Corey Kreider person is a lawyer that was involved in a case against the British government. During the pandemic, they had to cancel their placement exams, and they didn't want to just take the assessment of teachers because they thought there was great inflation. So what they did was that they acquired this AI system. The AI system basically lowered a lot of students' grades throughout the country, and it went to the point where many of those students lost their places in the colleges that they had been hoping for, the programs that they wanted, that they had been working towards. They just were left out. And so this lawyer here was one of the ones who was arguing against that. So let's go back into the three areas. I'm sorry, I keep forgetting.
It's okay.
So before we do that, we're going to look at the harms that can come from bias in AI. And the very first one is representational. Some groups are just not seen in positive lights. They're never portrayed in a positive way. Some groups are just basically going in a negative way completely. You know, this group is not going to get anything because they're not worth it. And that basically impacts allocation of resources. So it could be we're withholding opportunities or resources from you, or there's goods distribution, but you are not going to get it because whatever the AI system might have said about you. The groups that are affected. We know that the usual protected groups have always been affected in so many ways. So, you know, groups by sex, religion, gender identity, and so on. But the researchers in the area of AI also tell you occasionally it's important to consider other characteristics, and maybe not just only these protected groups, but also at some point maybe looking into the background, educational background of some students, the parents of the students, might be important. Some other times you got to look at the military affiliation of the student, because that may have something, some of an impact in the way they, you know, perform in school, or the way they are able to interact with other people, and so on and so forth. So now, yes, let's go back to the areas, but now let's take a look at some of the harms, and this is where Garamis is ready to party.
Now it's my turn, Maikel. All right, let's head on over to admissions. So, you know, these systems, you know, as Brenda was sharing, like one of the biggest challenges is that they are constructing these data sets, right? They're being fed these data sets that are starting off biased, you know, and as a result of teaching the machine to basically look at groups through these data sets, it does have the effect of exclusion, you know, excluding certain groups of people, and for various different reasons. So let's talk a little bit about some concerns, particularly in admissions. So the idea of what you do with that data, right? I mean, in order to train one of these machines, it takes massive amounts of data. In some cases, the machines have to be able to communicate with each other. And in communicating with each other, the question becomes like, well, then what does that transference look like? You know, like, where could that transference go? Who has access to that information? I'll give you a particular case outside of education. There was a young lady that was applying for a bank loan. She goes in, a bank loan for a mortgage. She gets denied that loan. She gets denied that loan because apparently the bank had access to her medical records. And as a result of that, they realized that she unfortunately had a tumor, and that was the reason why she was denied. So that's just one example of some of the ways that data could potentially leak, or there is a concern for the idea of oversharing. Again, going back to what Brenda said, there are groups that are going to be excluded as a result of how it is that you are feeding that machine, how it is that you are teaching that machine to be able to predict what students will likely do. Who are the students that you're actually taking this information from? How is that group comprised? How many? So are you including everybody? And if you're including everybody, then how do you categorize those various groups? So that way the machine can make a prediction that, again, does not exclude other people. We saw that in the case that Brenda mentioned with the idea of the placement exams inside the UK. That was a real thing. You know, unfortunately, they went back and they were able to fix some of the issues. Well, they threw out the placement exams. But even after throwing the placement exams, because so much time had passed, like Brenda said, those students who did want to go to a preferred university or college were unable to do so because, again, the system was already put in place, and it made a prediction that didn't necessarily coincide with the sort of assessments historically that students had received. And there's more on the reason why that might happen. But I'll give Maikel a chance to say something about this.
Okay, so I'll go back to kind of my tried and tested defense for. Here's the reality of it, right? If we look at how loans are being delivered regularly, that data is already being used disproportionately to disenfranchise particular groups as they are. And where I'm weary of this conversation and of the blame, I guess, is AI as being pointed as the problem, when we're seeing this problem absent of the use of AI doesn't get us to a solution.
Right.
So I think what we need to speak and what we need to focus on more in my nice diversion dance is we have to find a system that works or a process that works
Right.
outside of AI before we say AI is the problem.
Right. Okay. I don't disagree with that, because it is a question of, what are the systems that we're using to determine what these categories are. So if we're starting already with bias systems, right, then those bias systems are seeping into these programs that we're actually developing, that we're building. And the challenge sometimes becomes that we're almost oblivious to them, right? They're invisible to us. So as a result of that, it's only after the fact, when we have something like the placement exams that happen in the UK, or maybe some other issues, right, in terms of like particular people being excluded from a particular thing, right? So allocative issues, right? Then that's when it creeps up, and then everybody's surprised, like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this happened. But yes.
We do have a couple of areas that we want to discuss, and the next one is advising.
So yeah, going back to what we said at the beginning, especially when we touched upon this during Maikel's turn, right? The idea that these machines, we have to be careful with how much trust we put in them, right? Like we can't allow them to become sort of like the gatekeepers, right? In terms of career recommendations or limitations, in terms of like what our students are doing. So so I'll give you a perfect example, especially with high risk labels, right? So a black female in a STEM field might be considered a high risk label for an AI. Think about that for a second. Why? Because historically speaking, traditionally, there haven't been a lot of black females in the STEM fields, right? So the AI automatically marks that student as a high risk label, and then tries to provide advice in terms of what that student should do, right, in their career path. Well, guess what? Just because traditionally or historically that has not been the case, that doesn't mean that a person, regardless of race, color, etc., can't be successful in that field, or even, sex. So, so this is what I'm talking about in terms of how it is that the AI is making these decisions. And then a part of that is also the idea of transparency, right? So these AIs are being trained to make these sort of like predictions, to sort of like make the decisions, to offer advice, right? We are sometimes almost blindly saying, okay, yeah, this sounds good, let's do it. And sometimes we are not even realizing to what extent or how it is that the AI is actually making these decisions, which is a problem, right? If the person who is developing the AI themselves doesn't see that the AI is biased because, it's being trained, by biased systems, then how can we expect the people who then receive the AI, right, as an end product, right, then know, like, what these biases are going to be? Because, again, like, even the developer, like, can't really see all these issues. So that's why sometimes even the transparency becomes a problem in terms of making the decisions.
Excellent point. We did not practice all these offenses, by the way, everyone, so I'm just kind of, I will say one thing I think that's relevant in this particular topic that you definitely allude to is earlier, it's about the data.
Yeah.
I think it's very easy to point to the AI system and say, oh, well, it's predicting incorrectly, but the question was, why was demographic information plugged in to the factor of student success in this particular field in the first place? And again, I hate just kind of repeating myself on this, but we're not doing so great on the human one on that as well, right? As evidenced by a lot of our initiatives to try to circumvent that. Again, my rallying call for AI's utilization in the field is to take a burden off and be a major tool for helping our advising staff make quicker, better informed decisions and interventions. And we really need to get the data question, the privacy, all those considerations taken care of first before looking at the system that honestly is perpetuating decisions that we're already making without it.
Let's get to the assessment piece, because there are some issues here as well. Yeah,
so I'll be the first one to tell you that I am a huge proponent. I definitely would benefit from the idea of the AI auto-grading, automated.
You heard it. He's on our side. We won.
Not so fast, Michael. As a former English professor myself, I know how hard it can be to grade. It's basically what? It's an exponential, right? Like you have a paper of like 5 pages, you give it to like 50 students. Like how much are you reading? In like one weekend, or maybe like across 2 weeks or 3 weeks. So, and again, now wearing my instructional designer hat, my faculty developer hat, I also understand that I'm also an advocate for telling folks, hey, go in, provide more opportunities for students to practice. So I'm kind of stuck in the middle, right? And this is where AI would definitely benefit me, as an English professor. However, it's not a perfect system. The AI, as much as we'd like to think of it as actual artificial intelligence, just like, what we see in movies or on TV, it really isn't, right? Like AI is not an actual brain. Like these computers are not actually doing thinking, like the thinking to the level that we are, right? And so when you're thinking about like, oh, well, it's going to be able to grade our essays, it's going to be able to read context. No, it's not. At least not yet. And so what that means is that there have been cases where people can actually game the system, right? So if I know what it is that the AI is looking for in terms of what a good paper looks like, I can write the paper in such a way, right, to always ace it, always pass it. And so then what's the point, right? What's the point of having like the tool be able to grade all these, all these papers if the tool is actually not reading for context, if the tool isn't actually able to say like, okay, this is what the person's actually trying to say with this point. There's also instances and cases of the AI lacking in the idea of human connection, even though Maikel did make a point of saying like it will allow us to make more human connection. And that's just in cases where, look, students might be having a hard time, might be going through something, and you have these sort of automated systems running in your LMS or like somewhere else throughout your course, and they're not able to pick up on context. They're not able to pick up on like, hey, like this is somebody that's really going through something. Let me adjust. Let me pivot, because the tool has been programmed in a particular way to do certain things and not others. And then with the idea of academic integrity, there have been a lot of cases of false positives. We have instances of students who, for example, get blamed for cheating because they happen to have a poster, right, of a person's face in the background. And the AI picks it up as like, oh, there's another person there, so like somebody's helping you cheat. It's like, what's going on? It's just a poster. And then there are other instances, for example, of students getting picked up for cheating because they fidgeted. Right? So something as simple as, I'm talking to you right now, I say something, insightful or impactful, and you take 2 seconds to look up and just think. Well, guess what? They're recording you. Like the camera's looking right at you and it's saying, hey, you know what? You're taking too long, or you're looking at your notes in the ceiling, so you must be cheating. Like, no. So again, there have been cases of that. So all that to say that in the case of assessment, it's not an artificial intelligence to the extent that you see it in science fiction, right? It is still a program. It is still a program that's built to do very specific things, and as a result of that, it's not so developed or so how can I put this? So thoughtful, that I can actually say, okay, you know what? That is a poster, like that. You're okay, or okay, I understand that you're going to take 3 seconds to look up and think, or maybe even just fidget, like maybe taking a test makes me nervous, so I fidget a little bit more than a regular person. So, yeah. Maikel, go ahead.
That's tough, all right? There's a lot there. I'm going to, all right, so I'm going to hold on to my human connection point from earlier. But in assessments, the reason I'm going to hold on to it is I have to challenge, just like I challenge my students to think about their bar experience. When you have 150 students in a course and you're teaching them writing, for example, and your essay prompt is describe the occurrences in history that propagated World War I, we're really not asking for much high order, complex in some of these essays. To the credit of our faculty who have high course loads, who have a ton of students, I think artificial intelligence can come alongside and help with those fundamentals, but really what we're asking AI to do is something that we're not expecting or asking our faculty to do, our people to do. And so, again, I think we are using the thing that we can get the data on, that we can evaluate, look at a microscope, and actually applying some irrelevant expectations on it. And the false positives, I got nothing for you on that. That was I saw the poster one. I hear about these cases all the time. I just got to say, what we need to do in that space is it's an environment of learning change, where we go away from just this multiple choice, demonstrate you can identify and recall. And we go to some really authentic learning, some authentic assessment, where we don't have to worry about items like that, where AI isn't even necessary for that particular space.
Looking into this, we've heard all the positives, we've heard all the areas of concerns, but we're not here to tell you, hey, let's just drop up all the ideas about AI and let's just leave the room, forget about it, and forget that we ever tried. No, there's hope. So the reason why there's a lot of bias that can come into any one of these systems is that in every stage of the development process, a bias can come in. For example, in a task definition phase, and we have basically used some broad categories here, task definition phase, this is the part where the stakeholders are supposed to determine the goal for the system. What can go wrong here? Stakeholders are not participating, not all the ones that might be impacted, the users, and in addition to the developers. And also, if we don't have clear goals, then anybody could use the system for whatever they wanted because they don't understand what's going on, what they're supposed to be doing with it. When it comes to the data set construction, this is the stage where you select the data that you will fit into the system, you select the labels that you will use, and you select the measurements. What can go wrong? There's a mismatch between the data set that you have and the actual population. So your system is going to be relevant and perform well with that data set, but not the rest of the population.
Right. Data set construction is probably where you're going to see most of the bias creep in.
Yes, and that carries on for the rest of it, because if you have the wrong data set, it's going to be feeding into your model training, it's going to be feeding into the action where you won't be able to use this, the data set, or the decisions are not going to be accurate. So you get to the stage of model development, this is where you train your system, you had the wrong database, again, you're going to be training it incorrectly, but also you do the testing. If you only do testing with this many examples or cases, then is the model going to be performing correctly for these other groups that are still represented in the data, or should be?
I think that model training one too is really where we see some of the, I remember Garamis, we were all talking about this, and Garamis was like, how did you miss that?
Yeah.
We were talking about examples like where Facebook used a soap dispenser, but they didn't see it on different skin tones. Yeah. So if you were black, you weren't getting soap dispensed to you in the restroom. Or recently, during the COVID pandemic, pulse oximeters. They were being tested on only people with light skin, and so it was giving inaccurate readings for different skin tones. And how impactful can that be? And Garamis and I were standing like, how did you not see that? Yeah. But if you're training it and modeling it continuously because you forgot about that representational instance and component of bias, this is really where that becomes, the danger of AI is the power to exponentially predict. It's fast, it's efficient, but so much so that we get into the issues where we're worried with Garamis. I'm not saying he's right, I'm just saying I understand.
All right, so then the last stage is action, which is where the decision makers use the tools to make their determinations. If they're not trained properly, bias can come in as well, and you end up using the tool for something that wasn't supposed to be used. So then how can we address bias? We can, on that task definition stage, we can basically make sure that all the stakeholders participate, and actually they recommend that participate in an entire process. We can make sure that the goals are clear. In the data set construction set, make sure that you have guidelines for representation so that you have the appropriate groups represented. Make sure that your measurements are adequate. You may have data from different sites, and then the people on the site A, they collected data and they were collecting a lot of data, a lot of details about this group, but then on site B, they're not collecting as much, they were much more relaxed. So now you have differences in two groups, but they're actually not differences because they are different, it's because the way the data was collected. So you want to try to avoid that. With the model development stage, you want to be inclusive when you're doing your testing. So test your system against all of these different types of groups. Have stakeholders participate in the review process. And when it comes to the action stage, you want to ensure that the users of the system are trained and they know what the system is for, what it isn't for, the limitations. And then you also want to make sure that you have manual overrides for when the system says, oh, these students, you can't bring them to university, they're not going to do well. But then you realize as a decision maker, you know these people, you know what their potential is, and so you can definitely just make a decision that is different than what the system said. We have run out of time. The last couple of sections that we had were about addressing bias in the community in general. I don't know if you want to quickly say something.
Just to say that it takes all of us. It takes a village. Like we're all going to have to be engaged, with developers, various stakeholders, as AI continues to develop, and we continue to use these systems, in various areas, inside of higher ed. And across, I guess, education as a whole as well, because it's not just higher ed.
And something I want to say, you got to engage. AI is nothing of fairy tales anymore. We are allowing AI into our children's lives so much. The fact that we are not considering its impact into our place of work is truly neglectful, right? AI right now is telling my kid what he should watch, even spitting out to adults that I speak to what news stories they should follow in our social media, following those algorithms. There was a data set that came out that said an overwhelming majority of adults use social media for their news. AI is everywhere. We need to engage in those conversations.
So the last way to address bias is legislation. We have here 2 bills that have been introduced in the Senate and the House. And then we have this set of questions that we want you to use as weapons when you're evaluating AI systems. They are going to be available in the presentations. You have them here. And we leave you with this thought. A past built on bias is a future with bias built in. Let's try to work so that this doesn't continue to happen anymore.